Lacking belief in a god is a category error. Evolution is an F-tier argument for atheism, and the problem of evil only gets A-tier because a Christian guy thinks that nothing gets S-tier. One academic philosopher, one tier list. Let's go. Hello, I'm the Skeptic, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims, and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying. So this fellow is an academic philosopher. He tells us that in the first 4 words of his video, bless him, and he's ranking atheist arguments on a tier list. And to his credit, it's not entirely BS. Some of these are actually good reasons. And let's find out which tier shoe atheism goes in. But before finding out why I'm philosophically equivalent to a shoe, if this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell, and maybe the algorithm will give this a respectable tier. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos. Scott Carden and Megatron Jenkins. And a big thank you to channel members who get to use Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe and more hen emojis. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. Time for a tier list, I suppose.
As an academic philosopher, I'm ranking the best and worst arguments for atheism, and they're not all bad arguments.
Academic philosopher, see? Trained to speak BS, got it.
Some people think this is the strongest argument for atheism. We should only believe things on evidence, and since there's no evidence for God, well, we shouldn't believe in him. I think this is not a very good argument because it relies upon logical positivism.
This is more of a duh, obviously. If you're believing in things without something sufficient to back it up, that's a you problem.
If I can demonstrate it, therefore it exists. And it doesn't exist unless it can be demonstrated to exist. And this makes a big mistake about God just being a physical object within the universe, something we can go out and observe, whereas God, classically understood, is the ground of all existence. The classical philosophical proofs like contingency and motion are the evidence. I would give this a C tier that's respectable, and I'm certainly sympathetic to it. Like, I look out into the world, there is no God, but I think it's philosophically nearsighted.
Philosophical arguments aren't evidence, they're reasoning. Those are different things, but C tier is fair enough, I guess.
The second one here is evolution. We don't need a creator because evolution explains how humans got here. I'm really not sure about this one. I just don't see the pull on this, especially considering that I can be a theist and believe in evolution. With theistic evolution, they seem entirely mutually consistent. So I just don't see the thrust of this. I don't see how this could be an argument against, not just against God's existence, but for atheism. So I'm going to put this squarely in the F tier.
Actually, fair. Evolution doesn't disprove God. It just means you don't need a God for that specific bit.
Not all of these are bad, but this one's simply a lack of belief. This is what people on the internet have called shoe atheism. A shoe can hold this philosophical view of, well, it lacks belief in God.
Thank Reddit for that one.
I understand this from a certain perspective, but this more accurately describes agnosticism, not atheism. So I'm going to put that in the F tier. To call yourself an atheist and say that you simply lack belief in God, this is just a category error.
Agnosticism is about knowledge. Atheism is about belief. They're related, but not closely. A shoe doesn't lack belief in a God because a shoe has no brain to form beliefs. I lack belief because I've heard the arguments and I'm not convinced. F*** me. That's just how belief works.
The next one here is the I believe in just one less God than you. It's very popular. You hear people like Richard Dawkins use this. I think Christopher Hitchens has used this. Christians already reject Thor and Zeus and Odin and all these other gods. So, the atheist just goes one God further and rejects the Christian God as well. I just believe in one less God than you do.
Right. And why do Christians reject Thor and Zeus? Because there's no convincing evidence for them, which is exactly the atheist's point of view about the Christian God. If you look up, mate, you'll see the point fly over your head.
Again, this is a misunderstanding of what God is. Those gods of old mythology and pantheons, they are created beings. They're not eternal. They're certainly not what the classical God is said to be, the ipsum esse subsistens, or existence itself. You're comparing comic book characters to the author of everything in reality.
The author of everything in reality? And the evidence that your God specifically is the author rather than Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leave be upon her, is what? The philosophical arguments, which aren't evidence. We've already covered this.
The next bad argument is going to be a very familiar one. It's the omnipotence paradox, that can God create a stone so big that he can't lift it? This is a puzzle. It's not a problem. This relies upon a certain understanding of omnipotence that classical Christians just don't endorse, they don't accept, right? So ever since Thomas Aquinas and even before, omnipotence has been defined as anything that God can do which is logically coherent.
Fine, that's just a bit of fun though. However, God can't do logically impossible things, does some very strange things when you get to the Trinity.
Logic relies upon his own nature. So when we understand logic, we're just understanding God's nature. God cannot go against his own nature. This also does not make God subservient to his nature. He's not bound to his nature anymore than he's bound to anything else. It just shows us what God is. God can't do logically impossible things because they're just not things that can be done. God can't create a squared circle. He can't create a four-sided triangle. So these aren't limitations on God's power. They are just an explanation of what rationality and coherence are. So we're going to place this one, since it's a very fun puzzle, but it just doesn't have any philosophical push to it. We're going to place that in the F tier as well.
So God invented logic, and we know this because the Bible, which we trust because logic. Sorry, pal, it's the Bible.
No one cares!
The next bad argument is that there are too many contradictions in the Bible. How many angels were at the tomb? How many women discovered the empty tomb? Those sort of things. Now, I honestly don't understand how this would be an argument against God, God's existence, right?
It's not a direct argument against God's existence, no. It is an argument against the Bible being the perfect word of a perfect God, which is pretty important if that's the basis of your belief.
So this could be an argument against some sort of biblical fundamentalist literalism, right? But to say that a supreme creator of the universe doesn't exist simply because these things in this book are misunderstood, or they seem to conflict, or not just seem to conflict, right, that they're contradictory. I mean, you have to have some really narrow view of the Bible in order to make this work. And even then, so what? Suppose there are contradictions. I don't think that there are. I have a video on that. But suppose there are. Does that mean that there is not a God? I just don't see how this is a good argument. I'm going to put it in the F tier as well.
Fair enough as a logical point. F tier is a bit harsh, though.
All right, so the next one is a little bit stronger. It doesn't go in the F tier like all these other obviously bad ones. Religion is to blame for atrocities. Like, I sympathize with this one, as anybody should, right? The witch hunts, the Inquisition, the Crusades, right? These are all really terrible things.
At least he's acknowledging they're terrible. Some of his fellow Christy Bobs haven't got that far.
Apparently, this objection goes that religion poisons all things, and so, well, God can't exist somehow. So I'm not really sure. First of all, this is historically myopic because you have to completely ignore all those 20th century secular regimes that killed so many people.
Secular regimes committed atrocities in the name of political ideology, not atheism. Nobody marched anywhere shouting for the glory of not believing in a God. The Crusades were explicitly in a God's name.
Also, I'm not sure what this is supposed to prove in terms of God's not existing. Now, this is a legitimate complaint to have against followers of God, but to say that, even if you thought that religion endorsed these things, which is highly controversial. I mean, so you have a few bad actors who are misinterpreting passages in some holy book, and they twist it to their means. I mean, well, Christianity affirms that. It predicts that people are sinful and evil and will twist things to their means. So I'm not sure what this is doing, right? So, like, if Christians are bad actors and they do some really terrible things, somehow that makes God not exist. Somehow that settles the ultimate question as to whether the creator of the world exists. I'm not sure, right? So I'm going to put it in the D tier. I don't think it's a strong philosophical argument, but I think it's a strong rhetorical tool.
D tier, sure, whatever, but he's waving away a lot. The argument isn't just religious people do bad things, it's this supposedly loving God stands by and watches, which is a God to believe in.
And also, almost 95% of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed. So would you just do me a favor and double check that you're subscribed? I spent a lot of time making these videos. I'm just a one-man team here, and it means so much to me if you subscribe.
In the middle of ranking arguments for and against God's existence, we stop for a subscribe ask. Though I do it at the start and the end of videos. All right, skeptihypocrite.
As you can see, we have some more to go, and they're not all going to be bad. These are some really good ones coming up. This next one, science explains X without a creator. Our scientific knowledge is always constantly developing, and, well, if people are proposing this sort of God of the gaps explanation. Well, we know how lightning works. We know that it wasn't Thor or any of these other strange gods that built these things and do these things in the universe. So, as our scientific understanding increases, then our God hypothesis is obsolete. But this is just another category error.
Science hasn't explained this yet, and therefore God did it, are two very different conclusions. One is honest, the other is God putty.
Science can't really explain why there's order in the universe to begin with. It can't explain why there's science itself, why the laws work. It can't explain the laws of logic. It can't explain the laws of mathematics, so on and so forth. So science is not going to be able to explain everything. Does that mean that there must be a God? No. Remember, the dialectic here is God exists. Oh, well, science explains this, so God must therefore not exist. Well, no, because science doesn't explain everything. Certainly can't explain consciousness and all those other things I list. So,
correct. Science can't explain everything yet, and not yet explained, and therefore supernatural is still a gap argument. You just acknowledge that.
So this is, as far as being an argument against God's existence, it's a fun promissory note. The idea that maybe science someday will answer all these things for us. But as far as disproving God's existence, I think it has some teeth to it, right? So I will acknowledge that, but I don't think it, you know what? Let's put it in the C tier, right? So maybe as you understand more, then maybe, right? But that's the idea. It's like, maybe science will explain these things one day, right? But, I don't think it goes any higher than C tier.
C tier, yeah, that'll do, if you think this actually means anything.
The next one is that all religions can't be true. The idea that, well, we know that, all these other religions are false. They are all made up, so your religion's all made up too. First of all, I just don't think this is a very good argument. I mean, first of all, here's what I like about it. I like that it acknowledges that not all religions are the same, because that's what you don't want to hear. All religions are the same, therefore, well, they all say the same thing. Anyone is just as good as the other. Just pick one. This isn't saying that. This is saying that they're all different, but they're all similar in that they're religions. And if one religion is wrong, then they've all got to be wrong. I think this is just, first of all, a couple fallacies here.
That's not quite the argument. The point is, every culture has invented gods. Everyone considered false by everyone outside of that culture. What makes yours the exception? That's a reasonable question, not a fallacy.
First of all, hasty generalization and the fallacy of false equivalence, that these things, since they're similar in one respect, they must be equal or equivalent in all these other respects. And so this is just making... So, yeah, the Greek pantheons and Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam are all wrong, but we have independent grounds for thinking they're wrong.
And those independent grounds are what, exactly? Evidence? Because that's what atheists are asking for regarding Christianity too.
So this next one is pretty formidable. It's a religion is just man-made cope. I word it like that, but really it comes from Freud, it comes from Marx, this idea that religion is just this evolutionary survival mechanism to cope with the fear of death and meaninglessness. We need something to hold on to.
At least he's engaging with it seriously, rather than just pretending it isn't a cope.
And it's a really nice attempt at giving a naturalistic account of religion. The problem with this is that these accounts are usually highly speculative and without evidence. They can give us a just-so story, a just-so narrative that kind of explains how it came to be. Something like Daniel Dennett's Breaking the Spell. Something like, well, religions, all religions, I suppose, how the story goes, began as some sort of ancestor worship. We felt really bad and really sad that our ancestors died, our family died, and so we go to worship. And that just developed to these really complex religious systems that you see. That's all highly speculative. So I'm not sure what it does as a actual defeater for religious claims, like the proposition that God exists. It's not doing anything to undercut that proposition. So, I mean, it's a nice attempt. I'm going to place it in the D tier.
If you can fully explain the origin of a religious belief without needing a god to be real, that does make the god slightly less necessary.
So this next one is who created God? You can go about this a couple of different ways. So the first one, the most classical one, is responding to the cosmological argument. And, if somebody says that infinite regresses are not possible and there has to be an uncreated creator, an unmoved mover, uncaused cause, then that thing must be God. Then the sort of pat answer here, the pat response would just be, well, who created God? Who created that thing?
Classic. And I bet his answer's dumb.
As that sort of design, that sort of argument, I just think it's a bad argument. So it just misunderstands what an infinite regress is. how God is supposed to stop that thing. And most theists, if you said that there is a thing that creates the universe and then a thing beyond that thing that creates that thing created the thing that we're calling it, theists would just say, okay, well, let's back it up. That ultimate thing is the thing we're calling God. Forget about this thing that created some demiurge or whatever. The ultimate thing, the thing that must be necessary, the ultimate thing for all existence that created all existence and counts for all existence, that's going to be the thing that is God.
Sure, but why does the uncaused thing have to be a conscious personal being who cares too much about shellfish and mixed fabrics? Why can't it just be energy or something we don't have a name for that isn't a floaty skyman? Uncaused thing exists is reasonable, I guess.
However, Richard Dawkins, the philosopher that he is, gives this in a little bit different version of this. He calls it his famous 747 gambit. And the idea here is that suppose some whirlwind goes through a junkyard and creates all the parts necessary and makes a 747 Boeing airplane. Then that thing must be more complex than So in other words, since the universe is so complex, then the thing that made the universe is more complex. And since the universe is so improbable, then the thing that made the universe being more complex is even more improbable. But the problem, this response just completely misunderstands the whole commitment to God's divine simplicity.
Divine simplicity. God is simple. The creator of everything, in reality, is simple. So simple it made a shitty choking mechanism that we need to eat and breathe through.
The ones that we're left with here are some pretty formidable ones. I saved the best for last. Miracles aren't possible. Really, the objection here should be that miracles are highly improbable, because this objection comes from David Hume. Hume says the laws of nature are immutable, and assuming that they are, then any change in the laws, at least as far as our experience can observe, we have uniform experience against miracles, so any claim that there has been a miracle that has occurred is going to be highly improbable, and it's far more likely to assume that the person making that claim is just mistaken. And the problem with this is it's a bit circular, and Hume is making some really substantial assumptions here. He assumes that the universe is a closed material system, and that is not what theists hold to, right? And if God exists, then miracles are certainly possible.
If God exists, then miracles are possible by definition. The better argument is I've never seen one, and every claimed miracle has a mundane explanation. So probably isn't even a miracle.
And here's the thing, don't get kind of caught up and forget the dialectic. The dialectic here is God exists, and if you say miracles are impossible, well, that assumes that God exists in order to say that. So it's not an argument against God's existence. You would have to actually deal with So all it is an observation that you don't see miracles happen. So I can't put it, because of that dialectical weirdness, and it doesn't really follow the actual arguments, and it not being a true argument against God's existence, I can't even put it in the C tier. I would like to put it in the C tier for its strength as far as its historical significance, but as being an undercutter for God's existence, it's just not going to do the job.
You do what you want, mate. This list is BS anyway.
No one cares!
The next one here is that God can command atrocities. And the evidence for this is that in the Bible, God does this. He commands the slaughter of the Canaanites and so on and so forth, and just really terrible things. And it makes God out to be a moral monster. This also, you could take this as also the Euthyphro dilemma. Is something good because God commands it, making morality just arbitrary, or does God command it because it's good, in which case God is just subservient or less sovereign compared to morality or goodness? If you understand what the Euthyphro dilemma is and the classical theist answer to that, this completely dissolves. God's not going to be able to command atrocities because goodness and God are one.
Sounds great until you ask what goodness is in that framework. If God's nature just is goodness by definition, you've defined the problem away rather than solving it. Pretty lazy if you ask me.
Now the next one, penultimate one here, divine hiddenness, right? This is a big one. I've made a couple of videos on this. Now, if God is perfectly loving and wants a relationship with us, then why does he stay hidden? This is especially poignant and powerful when it's a non-resistant non-believer, somebody who really, really wants that relationship with God, really tries, and yet can't seem to believe.
Non-resistant, so I'm more powerful than a god because I can just not believe in it.
I'm going to place this in the B tier. Here's why. I can sympathize fully with this, right? If I really seek God and I'm not hearing him, like I'm praying to the wall, he's just not answering, that's going to be really extremely powerful evidence that God doesn't exist. Now, philosophically speaking, this is non-philosophical, non-theoretical, but philosophically speaking, once you understand what sort of assumptions you're relying upon, sort of naturalistic assumptions, perhaps positivistic or scientific assumptions here, then this becomes less of a sort of logical problem, but it doesn't mitigate the sort of evidential experience of I looked for God and he's just not there. He didn't answer me. If he's so powerful, he should have answered. So because of that, it's such an emotionally heavy, powerful objection. I mean, pre-theoretically emotionally heavy, powerful objection that requires serious theological nuance and philosophical nuance. I'm going to place it squarely in that B tier. It's hard to answer, so it's formidable. It goes in that B tier.
You just have naturalistic assumptions isn't right. There are naturalistic explanations in that things can be proven by repeatable testing. That's not an assumption.
Now, our last one, the problem of evil, it is formidable. This is not a Reddit atheist throwaway argument. First of all, it must be distinguished between the logical problem of evil, which I think has been solved, and I made a video about that. I made a few videos on this, but then again, with the evidential problem of evil or problem of suffering, that one is extremely potent, extremely powerful. It's really hard to answer. Not just from a pre-theoretical point of view, like we said with divine hiddenness, it's hard to answer from a philosophical point of view as well. So, and in order to answer this and divine hiddenness, you have to buy into this sort of worldview, Christian worldview, where this stuff just makes sense, right? Suffering makes sense. And so because of those heavy commitments that are required before you buy into this, because it's so difficult to answer, I would put it squarely in the A tier.
Good, because it is. Children dying of cancer, natural disasters, an omnipotent God who could prevent all of it and doesn't. That's not a Reddit throwaway. That's the hardest question in theology. A tier is about right, if you really care.
No one cares!
Now, the reason why I didn't put anything in the S tier, because I don't think that there are any elite arguments for God's existence. I think they are all answerable, ultimately. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe in God. I'm a Christian because I believe there are no knockdown, drag-out arguments against God's existence.
Here it is. He's a Christian because he believes there are no knockdown arguments against it. That's a very low bar for belief in something. There are no knockdown arguments against Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leave me upon her either. But I'm not putting her in S tier.
I thought that there were, and I had anything up here in the S tier, then I would change my belief based on the evidence, but I just don't think there are.
So, the standard for belief is, I can't disprove it. By that reckoning, I should believe in literally everything that hasn't been definitively ruled out. I'll have beliefs coming out of my So, lacking belief is a category error. The problem of evil gets A tier. And this man is a Christian because he can't find a knockdown argument against it. Well, to be fair, he's more honest than most. The divine hiddenness and problem of evil rankings are fair-ish. But calling lack of belief a category error while defining God as unfalsifiable and untestable is quite a trick. Did he rank these correctly? Let me know in the section below. I'm going to skeptic this as a tier list that puts shoe atheism in F and its own epistemology in the bin. A big thank you to this month's top level ticks on Patreon: Elizabeth, Jakari, William, Rick, George, Mark, Tamo and Mikael Lundgren, as well as all the $3 base ticks and channel members. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/theskeptic. The link is in the description along with links to all my other socials, or become a member by hitting the join button below this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the Skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.